your plan for reopening the Strait of Hormuz, Mr. Secretary?
Just note that the majority of your question was highly disingenuous and loaded with suggestions that I very much don't agree with. From the beginning,
please feel free, sir, to pick any one of those
From the
things.
beginning, we've been very clear about the military objectives and the underlying strategic objective, which is preventing Iran from getting a nuclear weapon.
Just listen to that tone. Ask a basic question about strategy, and suddenly you're branded highly disingenuous. It's the ultimate deflection. Zero plan. All attitude.
Concern, Mr. Secretary, is that you've achieved a series of tactical successes, but are on the verge of a strategic loss because we are now negotiating.
I just think it's so foolish. Here we are in a committee in the United States Senate, 74 days in, and you're talking about strategic loss. We have the ability to defeat a 47-year threat of a pursuit of a nuclear weapon. We have more leverage than we've ever had. We've had incredible battlefield successes, and you're talking about a strategic loss?
Mr. Secretary,
in disingenuous questions.
Mr. Secretary,
this is how you undercut efforts that could otherwise and are otherwise being very effective.
I am not your enemy, sir. I am not your adversary. I share your goal of preventing Iran from ever having a usable nuclear weapon. To finish my sentence, control of the Strait of Hormuz, the ability to degrade our partners and allies' gas and oil production capabilities through cheap drones, the ability to harass and harry commercial shipping remains in Iran's hands. And their demands are that we recognize sovereignty for them over the Strait of Hormuz, which I believe our president's rejected, you've rejected, I reject. But my question remains, how do we reopen the Strait of Hormuz to commercial shipping? If we control it, how do we reopen it? And your average American is seeing this at the gas pump every single day as the cost of gas continues to rise.
Senator Coons, I know that your question has not yet been responded to.
And it deserves an answer.
It does.
But I also understand I'm
answer.
delaying my colleagues. But that's the question that deserves an answer, Mr. Secretary.
We're 74 days into a war with gas prices soaring daily. And this is the Secretary of Defense's response? Instead of answering, he attacks. Chris Coons actually had to remind Pete Hegseth on camera that he isn't the enemy. When the man running the Pentagon treats basic oversight like a personal insult, that isn't strength. That is insecurity in a uniform. If this exchange struck a nerve with you too, hit like and let me know in the comments. Does this look like leadership to you?
Hegseth, General Kane, Chairman Kane, I agree with much of what the chairman said, including that we are in a moment of real contest and danger in no small part because Russia, China, DPRK, and Iran are partnering. Russia and China are helping resupply Iran and the drones that they're using to contest and close the Strait of Hormuz, to target and kill Americans and degrade our facilities. And so if our adversaries are increasingly aligned, I think a core question is, are we? We have so many questions, Mr. Secretary, about this budget proposal, this $1.5 trillion budget request. And at the core is going to be, what's the cost of the war we're in Iran? How long will it go? What damage has been done to our security and our strategic position? When will we get a supplemental request and of what scale? When will we be requested to authorize this war? And when will the American people get a clear answer about our strategic goals and how we will achieve them? I share the chairman's concern that we have created real distance with our allies, most principally our NATO allies who have stepped up and contributed tens of billions of dollars more to purchase the munitions for the defense of Ukraine and to dramatically increase their long overdue investments in our joint defense in Europe. But unfortunately, the way that the move towards war was launched 74 days ago, without consent, without consultation, has caused a real rift with our vital European allies. And again, as the chairman said, and I agree, there is also a critical and urgent need for us to recognize and embrace that in the most important test field, the battlefield in Ukraine, where the Ukrainians are fighting bravely and successfully against Russian aggression, they have innovated. They have delivered the most lethal and capable drone and counter-drone technologies in the world. What is bedeviling us in Iran right now? Their ability to use thousands of cheap, effective Shahed drones to hit our allies, their military facilities and their oil and gas production facilities, and to target and hit civilian shipping. Who's the world's best at intercepting Shahed drones? Ukraine. Last year, the administration requested 0 for Ukraine and 0 for our key NATO allies in the Baltic states. And on a bipartisan basis, this committee put in $400 million. When we met just about a month ago for the first time over at the Pentagon, and thank you for that conversation, we all emphasized the importance of coming to us with a spend plan for these $400 million. This is a $1.5 trillion request in front of us. Why am I taking your time on $400 million? Because I think it shows a key piece, a missing piece in strategic vision. We should not be standing aside from the war in Ukraine and saying, eventually we want to be a part of some peace between Russia and Ukraine.
This isn't just some random politician taking cheap shots. This is Chris Coons, the ranking member of the Senate Defense Appropriations Subcommittee and the man holding the Pentagon's purse strings. As one of Washington's most bipartisan senators, when he starts listing failures in an open hearing, the whole room pays attention. With clinical precision, he exposed a grim strategic reality. Our adversaries are coordinating, our allies are drifting, and this administration just requested 0 support for the nation holding the most advanced counter-drone playbook on Earth. That fact alone should be setting off massive alarm bells.
Learning the lessons of Ukraine. Our allies in the Persian Gulf they're buying their interceptor systems at scale. Some of our current and former leaders in our military were working very hard to learn the lessons of Ukraine. I must say, in a recent briefing for this subcommittee, I was very encouraged by 2 very senior members of the United States Army who are in Ukraine and have been helping our armed forces learn. But my heart fell when I left and was told that those 2 senior officers were being forced out. I am concerned that we have a distracted administration and a distracted department. From your written testimony, Mr. Secretary, it seems at times you're more passionate about fighting culture wars than winning the real war that we're in. At banning books, at cleaning alleged DEI off of websites, at taking on an anti-vaccine position rather than continuing the long-standing public health policies, at interfering with promotions. I'm stunned that you fired the 44-year Chief of Staff of the Army in the middle of a hot war and dismissed the Secretary of the Navy in the middle of a naval blockade. As dozens of senior flag rank officers have been dismissed, I am worried about what that does to focus and morale. We have a president who seems more focused on a billion-dollar ballroom and a victory arch rather than achieving actual victory, and a small piece of the $1.5 trillion request in front of us is for a new Trump class of battleships, a so-called Golden Fleet, which I think goes in the wrong direction. Let me come back to the basic point I was trying to make. The world of warfare is changing. Every major service can and should embrace smaller, lighter, faster, more distributed, lethal capabilities that will mostly be autonomous. This move towards a Golden Fleet, towards a new battleship, strikes me as moving in exactly the wrong direction, giving our adversaries a bigger target rather than a more capable platform. How do I explain to my constituents the cost of this war and the cost that we are looking together to invest in our national defense? I share the chairman's concerns about reconciliation. Last year, $150 billion was provided to the department, but the mismatch between base year and 1 year, between long-term and short-term, caused tens of billions of dollars in errors. Errors in how shipbuilding was handled, errors in how new munitions are being acquired. And working together on a bipartisan basis, we fixed many of those problems. This year's budget proposal triples that request to $350 billion. I agree with you about the urgency of our national defense. In your written testimony, you lay out 4 key goals: defend the homeland, deter China, increase burden sharing with our allies and partners, and supercharge the defense industrial base. As you've seen in the last Congress, I've worked with you and with Deputy Secretary Feinberg on multi-year munitions. I cheer the goal of finally passing an audit in 2028. I think we have critical investments to make in our defense industrial base. I think we are absolutely in the fight of our lives as a republic to win AI and quantum, space and surveillance, and the capacity to fight drones and launch drones. But I'm concerned that you, sir, and this department is distracted by issues that are not focused on the core thing we need to achieve. I could not agree more with what you said in your written testimony. For a generation, the United States was largely distracted by open-ended wars of regime change and nation building. And as you summarize this administration's approach, we will not send America's best to advance foolhardy or reckless adventures halfway around the world.
There it is. The mic drop moment that should have ended the entire hearing. With American forces locked in an active conflict and a naval blockade underway, the Secretary of Defense is busy purging top military leadership, firing the Army's top general and the Navy secretary simultaneously. To make matters worse, their budget funds nostalgic battleships instead of modern strategy. Senator Coons delivered the fatal blow. This administration appears more passionate about culture wars than the actual war. Banning books, scrubbing websites, and hijacking military promotions isn't a wartime posture. It's a political operation wearing a uniform. And the man sitting across, he sat there with absolutely no answer.
I agree that the Iranian regime is a terrible regime. I am grateful for the service and the sacrifice of the Americans who've been wounded or who've lost their lives in this current conflict. But I do not understand the strategy. And as the average American is seeing the costs at the pump and at the grocery store, and as this committee is being asked to approve the largest single-year increase in defense spending in decades, I need to better understand the answers to the urgent questions I've put before you. Mr. Secretary, in January, President Trump signed the fiscal year 26 defense appropriations bill. It provided $400 million specifically to aid Ukraine in their fight against Russia. This is at a time when our European allies and partners have stepped up to take on the overwhelming majority of the cost of any munitions or support for Ukraine. So far, your department has not spent a dime of that $400 million, despite repeated follow-up requests from the chairman and myself. In a call just last week, your staff indicated we will see a spend plan for those funds this week. Will you commit to spending those $400 million for weapons for Ukraine, and when will we receive your department's spend plan?
I appreciate that question. The $400 million for European capacity building has been released from the Secretary of War's office, and we'll work with EUCOM to make sure they spend it accordingly and properly, which we have all faith that they will.
Mr. Secretary, when will this subcommittee get the associated spend plan for the $400 million?
Yeah, I mean, we will work with your committee to make sure that the spend plan as allocated, I want to make sure EUCOM is fully informed in how they want to spend this. They're the closest to the problem set. And so working with them to ensure that you have the spend plan, we'll work with you.
Mr. Secretary, thank you, but it's May, and this has been the law since January, and you or your representatives have been asked this repeatedly on a bipartisan basis by members of this committee. And I think dragging our feet on this small investment in Ukraine's defense sends exactly the wrong signal to Putin at a time when the contest for freedom has its front lines in Ukraine. As you said, Europe has stepped up, donating billions to buy U.S. weapons to send to Ukraine to help them as they continue to take ground on the battlefield. But it seems not all the money donated by our European allies is going to buy new weapons for Ukraine, as they had understood. The memo you released just last week, prior to your testimony at Senate Armed Services, indicated DOD has and will continue to divert some of these funds back into DOD accounts for our own use. Will you commit, Mr. Secretary, to spend every dollar donated by our European allies for Ukraine on new weapons and capabilities for Ukraine?
The Pearl Initiative, which you're referring to, which is instituted underneath this administration so that European countries are paying for American equipment to provide as they see fit. NATO allocates where it would like to allocate that. It can choose Ukraine if it'd like. That money, when it's paid for, that's where it goes. It goes to those efforts.
Well, look, as the chairman raised, and as I will repeat, I view NATO as the most successful mutual defense relationship we've ever had. And your comment about we need not flags, but real and capable allies, and the foot dragging on both Pearl and the investments in our Baltic allies and Ukraine causes me real concern.
$400 million was approved in January, yet it's still collecting dust in May. While Hegseth asked Congress for the largest single-year defense increase in decades, his own department can't even move a modest bipartisan Ukraine package that is already signed into law? Make no mistake, this isn't bureaucracy, it's a deliberate choice. And the signal it broadcasts to Moscow is absolutely unmistakable.
A bipartisan group of us from the Senate and the House went to Denmark to lay a wreath at the memorial to the 52 Danes who served, fought, and died alongside our troops in Afghanistan. Those were not just flags. Those were real warfighters who fought and died at our request in a war that began by NATO's initiation, a service and sacrifice in Afghanistan. I just think we're sending the wrong signal by the president's announcement of the intention to withdraw 5,000 troops from Germany. Could you help me understand what is the strategic reason for a drawdown of U.S. troops from Western Europe?
I would just like to clarify, Senator, it's never about the heroism of foreign troops. I fought alongside great British and European and Australian allies in Afghanistan. It's the political caveats and the limitations that they come with. It's not the troops. It's the capitals of those militaries that limit what they're able to do, where they're able to go, who they're able to fight, that create limits on our own. And anybody that's been in these formations knows that. So it's easy to talk about here. It's another thing to apply. And we need allies that are burden sharing, not becoming a burden with political limitations. I'm not talking about the troops.
Thank you. Our president said in Europe that we never asked for and never received anything from our NATO allies. Was that your experience in Afghanistan, serving and fighting alongside our NATO allies?
I've written extensively about that, and the vast majority of my experience was frustration with the limits of what those troops were able to do because of the political caveats, rules of engagement, and limits that came from their capitals.
But you don't doubt our question that about a third of all the combat casualties in our war in Afghanistan were our NATO partners and allies.
I would have to go back and check that number, but I take your word for it.
Let me just assert that hundreds and hundreds of service members from, as you put it, Australia and the United Kingdom, as well as many other of our allies, served, fought, and died alongside us. So I'm just going to simply say, in terms of our reliance on our partnerships, I'll agree with the chairman that at a moment when Russia and China, North Korea, and Iran are coming closer together and delivering a bedeviling lethality in this ongoing war in Iran, for which we don't have a clear strategy or clear answers, our better strategy would be to partner more closely with Ukraine, dig in deeper with our real values-based allies, our treaty allies in the Western Pacific and in Europe, and together find a path out of this, rather than berating them and bullying them for not coming along in a war they were not consulted about or briefed on before it began. I look forward to a second round. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Hegseth's response exposes his true playbook. He is quick to praise individual soldiers while blatantly dismissing the very nations that sent them. He brushes off alliance politics as a personal inconvenience rather than the essential bedrock of collective defense. Meanwhile, the administration announces a troop drawdown in Germany and continues to sit on Ukraine funding that Congress has already approved. Make no mistake, this isn't hard-nosed realism. This is a Secretary of Defense treating our allies as problems to be managed rather than partners to be strengthened. At the exact moment our adversaries are uniting against us.
Moments ago, Mr. Secretary, we control the Strait, but it's clear that reopening the Strait of Hormuz for commercial traffic eludes us, in no small part because Iran retains a robust stockpile of cheap, lethal Shahed drones, and they are getting help from our adversaries in rebuilding them. What is your plan for reopening the Strait of Hormuz, Mr. Secretary?
I would just note that the majority of your question was highly disingenuous and loaded with suggestions that I very much don't agree with. From the beginning,
please feel free, sir, to pick any one of those
From the
things.
beginning, we've been very clear about the military objectives and the underlying strategic objective, which is preventing Iran from getting a nuclear weapon.
Yes.
Take, for example, the fact that Iranian's conventional Navy, they had aircraft carriers with Shahed drones on them before this started. They had full-on destroyers and battleship capabilities, none of which they have anymore. And
did the Iranian Navy have aircraft carriers?
Iranian Navy had 3 drone aircraft carriers. The Iranian Navy had 11
launch
submarines.
platforms for drones, sure.
It had 11 submarines.
And you've
they
sunk all of the regular Navy. Great. Good.
They retain fast boat capabilities, which they've always had. We understand that, which we can control for and will. We've degraded almost completely their defense industrial base capabilities. The idea that they control anything, you can terrorize something, you can hold it at issue with piracy, as I've talked about at the Pentagon podium time and time again. That doesn't mean you control it. We control what goes in and out, and we control whether or not we have to restart conflict. The president does as well.
Mr.
So
Secretary,
we're the ones that will manage where this goes in the future, and they have very limited ability to set the tempo or respond to it, and that gives the president a lot of options to ensure that Iran never gets a nuclear weapon.
The connection between their ability to close the Strait of Hormuz using fast boats and Shahed drones and our strategic goal, shared broadly, to prevent them from ever having a usable nuclear weapon is utterly unclear to me. And my question was, what's the plan for reopening the Strait of Hormuz to commercial traffic, given
shared broadly, but
skyrocketing
never
prices?
executed. Shared broadly, but never executed, because previous administration didn't have the willingness to actually do what it would take. And when Iran was at its weakest moments following the 12-day war, but still wanted the pursuit of a nuclear capability, President Trump made the courageous decision to go at their conventional umbrella and shield, which they were using to protect their nuclear program, which we knew came with threats and branches and sequels.
Pete Hegseth continues to parrot the same tired line. We control the Strait of Hormuz. But let's be clear, claiming control without the actual ability to secure and reopen it isn't a strategy, it's a hollow talking point. While commercial shipping remains paralyzed, Iran wields cheap, highly effective drones, and everyday Americans watch gas prices climb relentlessly. Yet, when pressed for a concrete plan to restore free passage, the Secretary of Defense offers absolutely nothing. Instead, he attacks the question. This exposes a glaring pattern: loud tactical claims completely devoid of strategic follow-through. He projects an illusion of dominance that instantly evaporates under basic scrutiny. Meanwhile, his budget aggressively pushes for a nostalgic golden fleet of massive surface ships, entirely ignoring the reality of modern warfare. Every serious military assessment, proven daily in Ukraine and rapidly adopted by the Gulf states, points towards smaller, faster, distributed, and autonomous systems. You simply cannot claim to be fighting a modern war while bankrupting us for yesterday's Navy and refusing to answer today's most basic operational questions. That's not strategy, that is theater. That is, watch this entire hearing, and one chilling conclusion becomes unavoidable. Pete Hegseth does not view congressional oversight as a constitutional duty. He treats it as a personal insult. When Senator Chris Coons, a respected, highly bipartisan voice who controls the Pentagon's purse strings, presses for clarity on strategy, timelines, and alliances, Hegseth reaches for the word disingenuous rather than providing an answer. That is not strength. That is fragile insecurity desperately dressed up as toughness. When a senator literally has to state on camera, "I am not your enemy." The problem goes far beyond a single tense exchange. It reveals a leadership style utterly incapable of withstanding scrutiny. A true wartime defense secretary must be able to clearly explain the endgame, the costs, and the role of our allies without retreating into a defensive crouch. Hegseth consistently fails this vital test. He substitutes grand declarations for actual plans, personalizes every disagreement, and frames basic oversight as hostility. This is profoundly dangerous. When the man leading the most powerful military on Earth reacts to accountability like a defensive cable news host, the entire institution suffers. Our allies notice. Our adversaries notice. Ultimately, the public notices that the loudest proclamations of strength are coming from a man terrified to answer the simplest questions. That is the real tragedy of this hearing. A defense secretary who fatally confuses defiance with leadership,